Good morning and welcome to another episode of the Geopolitics live stream. I am your host, Sarah, and I am here once again, perfect timing, with the one and only Scott Ritter and Danny Haifong in the chat. Scott, hi, how are you?
Good. You had me excited for a moment when I listened to that music coming in. I thought just for a second that I said, "Damn, she uploaded Macklemore's Heinz Hall, and we're getting ready to do some serious
I
rapping."
can't do Macklemore yet. They're going to ban me for copyright infringement. But how are you? What an interesting week to have you on. I initially said, can I get Scott on to talk about Rafah? And then everything kind of happened in the last 24 hours. So we'll get right into it with the Rafah offensive. We have a few assets to show you guys just to get an idea of what we're talking about. So we had a sort of a minor ceasefire discussion, which Hamas agreed to, and then Israel kind of said, this is a trick. We're going into Rafah anyway. So let's just show this video quickly and then get into Scott about the actual operation itself. Oop. Not that one. So we have obviously destruction of the signage and reaching all the way to the border. Scott, what was the operation? When was it commenced? What does it consist of? What are we kind of looking at here?
These are all questions for the Israeli Defense Force.
but we saw the offensive kind of with a lot of air activity, and then we saw on the ground kind of like silly, kind of like propaganda TikTok videos. So what's really happening?
What happened was, for a while, Israel was confronted with the failure of its Hamas, anti-Hamas operation, and it had not solidified internally the will to confront the United States over Rafah. The United States has always said this is a red line. We don't want to allow that. There were problems with Egypt. People tend to forget that 1979 Camp David's Accord prohibit Israel from. This is a demilitarized zone. Only Egypt's allowed to have police in the Philadelphia corridor along the border with Rafah. This is just an abject violation of that and the Philadelphia Accord. I think 2004, 2007, around there. So for Israel to move into Rafah, it would have to be willing to take on the United States, take on Egypt, take on the world. And it was feeling pretty weak at a time when Hezbollah was flexing some serious muscle up north, and at a time when Israel had struck an Iranian consulate building in Damascus, and there was the potential of a broader conflict with Iran. So Israel withdrew from Gaza and engaged in the north. That situation played out the way it did, with Iran launching a massive retaliatory strike against Israel that was designed to make the point that, you can no longer deter us. We have the ability to reach out and touch you anytime we want to, anywhere we want to. Israel got the message, but an interesting thing happened there. And this is my own analysis, which is risky, but we'll put it out there anyways. Prior to the Iranian response, or the Iranian retaliation and the Israeli response, the Hezbollah and Iran had operated under the notion that if Israel made a decisive move against Gaza, that they would intervene. Hezbollah is not in a position to decisively engage Israel without the backing of Iran, and Iran's participation was assumed. But what's happened now that Iran struck Israel retaliated with its limited retaliation. A deterrence model has been imposed, which gives Iran deterrence dominance, but only when it comes to Israeli strikes against Iranian territory. So what Iran did actually in this way is tie its own hands, because it can't strike Israel now, according to its own doctrine, simply for Israel committing the crime of going into Gaza. And Hezbollah won't escalate blindly without the potential of an Iranian cap on top of it. And so both Hezbollah and Iran now are limited in what they can do. And this has freed up Israel politically and militarily. They don't have to worry about a huge war in the north. What they're going to get in the north is major de-escalated escalation, if you know what I'm trying to say here, meaning that, yeah, there'll be a lot of violence, but we now know that it's not going to blow out of control, that there's not going to be an Operation Litani 2. Israel is not trying to push Hezbollah back to the Litani River, and Hezbollah is not going to take over the Galilee. They're going to be exchanging fire, and Israel has basically said that's the price we have to pay to go back and finish this job in Gaza. And so now Israel is freed up. They come back, and now they have to play some political games because there were active negotiations going on. Look, when their hand was weak, Israel was like, okay, let's talk about potential ceasefires and stuff. But now Israel has come back, and they've pressed people, the United States. The United States feels guilty about what they did in terms of jamming Israel on an Iranian response. There's many in America that are like, well, we didn't treat the Israelis too kind here. And so now they're sympathetic. They understand that Netanyahu's in a political bind. And so there's people in the United States that are winking and nodding at a Rafah operation. I mean, how else can you explain the United States being ready to send, military contractors to the Rafah crossing in violation of everything we've ever said about Gaza, Egypt, Israel, the border, etc. And this decision didn't happen overnight. It's a decision that's been staffed in the interagency process for weeks now. So the United States has been leaning in this direction. And I just want to emphasize that this attack wouldn't take place if it weren't for the United States.
Well, how well is propaganda actually working? You wrote a really great article. I was reading it today, the Israel and Iran new deterrence paradigm. And then I actually just saw, right when I was waiting for the live to come on, another article about Israelis dying in the north, and that was posted by a Zionist, an Israeli source. 4 more IOF soldiers died in North Gaza, so they're not really even doing that great. Were we correct in kind of assuming that? And then is propaganda kind of playing on America, thinking like, yeah, let's encourage this, or they're actually doing really good?
I don't think the United States I don't see the propaganda in the United States saying that Israel is doing really well. In fact, one of the problems that Israeli faces is that that it's losing the narrative here in the United States. I mean, we don't see people on the air talking about the nuance of Israeli military operations in Gaza as much as we talk about student protests in universities around the country in sympathy with the Palestinians in the Gazan cause. So Israel has found itself in a situation where it literally has no other choice. This government, this right-wing government of Netanyahu, in order to survive, they need to continue to be a war government. They don't want the war to be up with Lebanon because that becomes embarrassing after a while. Just sitting there getting pounded by Hezbollah. Yeah, you can pound back, but it's a go nowhere situation. And the Israeli people, hundreds of thousands, have fled the north. They don't want a perpetual war. He can't talk about Iran anymore because they've settled that. There's now a deterrence mode of operations in play. The last thing that's left is Hamas, going back to Hamas. And I think the Israelis now have taken a decision that they aren't going to, because they know they can't achieve the 2 goals that they set for this, which is the military defeat of Hamas and the political annihilation of Hamas leadership. As we speak, Hamas has gone back. It's an anthill down there, and the ants are coming out of the ground in northern Gaza. They're coming out of the ground in Khan Yunis. They're still underground in Rafah. They're not going to be defeated. The political leadership is strong now as it's ever been. They're going to remove the population. And I think that's their goal and objective right now, is to get the Palestinian population out of Gaza.
That's
Why else
kind
would
of
you
pushing them into a humanitarian area by the pier.
They could push them there so they can be evacuated by the pier. They'll push them away from Rafah, blow it up, because they have to clear Rafah to go in and be seen as going through the motions, because you have to justify this one. This, you can't. Even the Israelis can't be so blatant as to just say we're just in it for killing Palestinians, because that's all they're in it for, is killing Palestinians. But they've got to pretend at least to go after the battalions of Hamas they claim are, have taken refuge in Rafah. And so there will be a military operation. They'll go in and do to Rafah what they did to Gaza, what they did to Khan Yunis, blow up the infrastructure, make a show of blowing up some tunnels. And then they'll say, yeah, we did it. We nullified them. But now what do we do with all these civilians? And they're going to keep bombing them, keep killing them, keep slaughtering them. And the Israelis are betting that they can wait out the world, that the world won't sit by and watch the Palestinians suffer like this, that the world won't intervene decisively, because the United States maintains the block at the United Nations, which is the only vehicle that would allow international legitimacy for this kind of stuff. Nobody has the courage to take on Israel by themselves. The Turks don't, the Egyptians don't. I mean, my God, the Egyptians just showed themselves to be a nothing nation. I'm sorry to all the Egyptians out there, but shame on you. You stand for nothing. You are nothing. You're worse than nothing. You're going to sit there and let your fellow Arabs, your Palestinian brothers, be slaughtered like this. No, this is your chance, and you blew it. This is the time to send 5 divisions towards Gaza, and you blew it, because had you sent 5 divisions toward Gaza, Israel wouldn't be doing this, because the United States would have to admit that Egypt's in the right, that Israel has violated the Camp David peace accords, has violated the Philadelphia Accords, that Israel's in violation of international law, and that Egypt has every right under Article 51 of the United Nations Charter to carry out these actions. But Egypt is not going to do that. Israel gambled that nobody will do anything. And so far, the Israelis are right. What has Joe Biden done? Held up a couple bombs. Did you hear his statement to NPR? Or no, I think it was to CNN. Yeah, I held up an old shipment of weapons and this and that, but we will not turn our back on the Israelis and their legitimate defense when it comes to the north. Well, what do you think they bomb Lebanon with? 2,000-pound bombs. They got a whole bunch of them. They're landing right now. We haven't stopped sending weapons to Israel. We send them all the weapons they need to continue this conflict with Lebanon, to be able to expand the conflict further if they need it. So this is a lie. Everything America is doing here is just an out and out lie. And, to be honest, the only people in America right now that make my heart go pitter patter, besides my wife, is the students. The students. God bless the students. God bless the faculty that support them. They have become the symbol of what America should be. What they are doing is embracing values that America should embrace collectively, but we don't. So God bless them. God bless the faculty, and goddamn the rest of America, and goddamn Israel as well, because this is just absolute. It's a crime against humanity. We all know it's a crime against humanity, but somehow Israel has gambled right that nobody has the courage to stand up to Israel, except the Palestinians, except Hezbollah to a limited degree. The Houthi, of course, the Houthi get standing ovation every day of the year, but the Iranians, they have issues of their own that they have to deal with. And if what's going on is not an existential struggle for Iran, they're not going to sacrifice all the measures they've undertaken over the course of the last few years to get out from underneath sanctions, to get themselves back into the international community via BRICS, the SCO. They're not going to throw that all away, for the Palestinians. I mean, I'm not picking on Iran too much, because last time I checked, they're the only ones that have a constitution that requires them to give money to the Palestinian people, and they do, and they are supportive. But You can't expect a nation to commit suicide. And for Iran to actually go to war over Palestine, it would put Iran in a horribly difficult situation, especially since Iran, looking around, says nobody else has the courage to step up with us. I mean, Hezbollah, of course, Hezbollah is great, but come on, it's Lebanon at the end of the day. As brave as the Hezbollah fighters are, at the end of the day, it's Lebanon. It's not like it's, a major regional superpower. Egypt has the potential, but Egypt is a cowardly nation. I can't even begin to articulate the disdain I have for Egypt at this point in time.
So do you think, hypothetically speaking, militarily, Egypt would be quite a formidable partner for Israel? And what would the United States reaction be if Israel, or if Egypt, enacted Article 51 and did invade Gaza?
To be honest, the Israeli forces are so overmatched right now, so exhausted, so operationally constrained by what they've done, that if Egypt engaged decisively, it would make the initial moments of Yom Kippur, pale in comparison. That Egypt, if they were to bring in, several armored divisions, there's nothing the Israelis could do short of, nuclear weapons to stop them. That's the reality. But Egypt is addicted to the American aid. They're not going to give it up because this would require the United States to actually believe in what. But here's the This is the signal that's being sent to the world. You can never trust America. Now, I mean, if you haven't figured that one out by now, shame on you. But America runs around and says, we are the world's mediator. We're the world's conscience. We can sit down and do a deal. Well, hell, the Iran nuclear deal. We backed out of that. We lied about not 1 inch eastward to the Russians. We lied about that. We lied about everything. And here we have the Camp David Accords, and it turns out we're liars. We're not. Nothing we commit to is worth the ink on the paper because the words are meaningless. America stands for nothing, literally nothing. And this is the signal that's been sent out there. And I just hope that everybody out there who is relying upon, the American ally understands that no, at the end of the day, especially if it takes place in the silly season of an American presidential election year, nothing matters except narcissistic politicians getting reelected. That's the only thing that matters. And they will sell everything. They will sell their mother. They will sell their children. They'll damn well sell any ally we have out there because all they care about is getting reelected. Biden isn't going to do the right thing here because that could create controversy and damage his election. But I always hear these people say, it's not about me. It's about the office of the presidency, that we have to respect the integrity of the office of the president. Well, God, I'm watching my language here. You are the president of the United States who's in charge of implementing a treaty that's been ratified by the United States Senate, Supremacy Clause, Constitution, law of the land, and you're disregarded. And where's Congress? Where's Congress screaming, Mr. President, the Philadelphia corridor has been violated by the Israeli army? Nobody wants to talk about that because they've all been, Israel owns them. So this just proves that America can't be trusted. And now imagine you're the Russians and you're sitting there going, all right, there's going to be an election. Maybe Ukraine will be resolved sort of by then. Maybe we can start talking about arms control. And now if I'm the Russian, I'm sitting there going, no, we ain't doing arms
control. No way.
Not in God's name would we ever sign an American name on it. We will never do that again. Why? Why would you?
Well, what do they think they are, negotiating from a place of power? You yourself just said America stands for nothing. So where do they get the audacity? I mean, you wrote, and also I wanted to you to expand upon the article that you recently wrote. You said about the exercise that Israel simulated with Iran in collaboration with the United States. Can you tell us more about this exercise and how badly Israel performed and what it kind of entailed?
Well, it was actually 2 exercises one in 2023. I think it was called Operation Chariot of Fire. If you guys Google it, you may find it. And then one in 2022, whose code name I can't remember. But both of them were designed to stress test the Israeli Defense Force. The working theme was, what happens if everything goes bad at once? Can we win? And what do we have to do? And so the United States sat in on the exercise in 2022, I believe. We were more of an observer but 2023 we participated because we said, okay, from the 2022 lessons, which turned out Israel can't win, they said, well, what do we need to do? First thing they needed to do is they needed to rebuild this ballistic missile defense shield, because under the exercise, basically Hezbollah exhausted the shield, and then Israel was exposed to attacks. The other thing was, if you're going to take out Iran, you can't do it without the United States, and that the United States has to fully commit, to that scenario. And so the United States was doing things such as bringing in refueling tankers. I wasn't a part of this, and I don't have a security clearance right now, so I'm only saying things that I've read about. I can't say that they're true or accurate or whatever. But we loan them KC-135 tankers. So they basically fly in with American markings, and suddenly they don't have American markings. And, I don't know if the pilots are sheep dipped or, Jewish American pilots that suddenly become Israeli pilots overnight. But suddenly Israel has a refueling capability. America is providing combat air patrol, electronic warfare capability, suppression capability, the whole thing. That was that. In Hezbollah, they would come in and they would drive Hezbollah back to the Litani River and destroy them in place. Syria would be managed. The Golan Heights would be secured. They would launch strikes against Syria. But the interesting thing about both of these exercises is that the Gaza and the West Bank, they said it'll just be a intifada. We'll just have a little bit of an intifada stuff. So all we have to allocate resource-wise is border police, a couple brigades of troops, some cops to beat people up, but all we have to do is contain the violence. But it's not going to be a major deal. The majority of our forces are going to be focused on Lebanon, and our air forces are going to be focused on Lebanon, Syria, and Iran. In every case, they still lost. That's the bottom line. No matter what, they couldn't prevail. The scenarios were done realistically. Iron Dome ran out of ammunition. Eventually, the missiles came in and hit the targets they needed to hit. They didn't have the ability in a non-nuclear scenario to take out Iran's strategic targets. And so they roll into 2024 knowing that this is the case, but they're working on it. This is why the United States deploys the THAAD missile system to Israel. This is why the United States deploys sensitive X-band radars. This is why we plug in Aegis-capable ships and their S-band radars and their SM-3 and SM-6 missiles into this overall BM ballistic missile defense hierarchy architecture that's linked back to satellites working out of the United States, all working together. And the idea was this will give a shield that will protect Israel on this one. But the other thing that happened was October 7th changed everything, because suddenly what was supposed to just be a police action in the grander scheme of things became the major military focus of effort. 300,000 troops mobilized, many of them deployed in the south. Meanwhile, Hezbollah is blowing up, and the brigades that are supposed to be up there on the border are down here in the south. And they don't have enough troops. They're bringing up reserves, but as they bring up the reserves, they're displacing 200,000 out of the north, another 100,000 out of the south. You got 250,000 people unemployed, homeless, that have to be accounted for, taken care of. That costs money. The economy's broken. Houthis jump up, break off the shipping lanes into Elliott Port. Billions of dollars of income is denied. Now Iran starts threatening to come in. Israel is in a horrible position. They don't have the military capacity to do everything at once, and that's the reality that is apparent today. And this is why when we first started this conversation, I talked about how Israel had to take a pause on Gaza to go up north, because in this case, Israel cannot walk and chew gum at the same time. They can either walk or they can chew gum, but they can't do both.
I want to ask the question from our audience before we move on to the next topic, because it has to do with the assault. But Scott, is this genocide being committed? This is from Sierra. Thank you, Sierra. Is this genocide being committed because Israel wants a transport hub from Saudi Arabia through Israel and Gaza into the Mediterranean?
I mean, look, Israel desperately needs that. That was their ticket out of all this nightmare, the so-called India Middle East Economic Corridor that was promoted by Joe Biden last year at the G20 summit in India, and it's something that the Indians believe in as well. I had the pleasure of listening to a senior Indian economist talk about how India believes in this. That this is, India's sort of response to China's Belts and Roads initiative, and regionally how India can make itself relevant economically and geopolitically. The United States believes in it. Israel believes in it. Saudi Arabia was sort of believing in it. I mean, they're headed in that direction, but it would require them to have normalized relations with Israel. And of course, the Israeli response after October 7th made that impossible. I think the Israelis now understand that they need to nip this Palestinian statehood issue in the bud, meaning they politically made the decision there will not be a Palestinian state. And so look what they're doing. They're doubling down on West Bank settlements. Again, nobody's doing anything about it. They're just running in there, stealing homes, killing people, burning down olive orchards. And the whole world's like, oh, I guess you're still doing that. Yeah. The Brooklyn Jews have taken over. And I don't mean to be, I know people, you're anti-Semitic. No, I'm just being factually accurate. There's a whole bunch of radical Zionist Jews in Brooklyn who fly over to Israel, and they steal the homes of the Palestinians on the West Bank. And so to call them anything other than what they are, Brooklyn Jews, that's it. They're American citizens. And the reason why I emphasize that is we could control this. We literally could control this. We could say what you're doing is a crime. And we issue arrest warrants. And if you come back to America and we freeze your assets, we strangle you, you die economically. We could do all that, but we don't. We sit there and go, oh, look, we're so opposed to West Bank settlements, but those are Brooklyn Jews.
Literally.
They would murder, literally Brooklyn Jews. So, the West Bank thing's happening. We're shutting down the West Bank. The big problem right now is Gaza. And the Israelis now, I believe, have committed to genocide. Now, they're either going to kill them or they're going to evict them. But one way or the other, the Israeli policy hinges on getting the Palestinian population in Gaza out of Gaza. And then Gaza now becomes part of Greater Israel. So does the West Bank. You get rid of them. And now you have this pure Jewish thing that they're going to call Greater Israel. And it's going to be propped up by its new relevance, economic relevance in the world. It is now the gateway to Europe for India through the Middle East in this corridor that makes no sense because Joe Biden puts it out there. I'm supporting this because it's a counter to them Chinese or the Belts and Roads. And I'm like, yeah, but you're going into a port in Dubai that the Chinese play a heavy role in. You're jumping on a UAE railway built by the Chinese that is transferring to a Saudi Arabian railway built by the Chinese. You have to get on a Jordanian railway that isn't built yet, but when it's built, it'll be built by the Chinese. It'll go to an Israeli port, Haifa, that's run by the Chinese, get on ships that are owned by the Chinese, go into a Greek port that once again is run and managed by the Chinese. You are literally plugging into the Belts and Roads Initiative, and you're saying somehow this is genius. It's in the extreme. But that is part. I mean, look, when Netanyahu spoke at the General Assembly in September, the General Assembly debate. I love how they call it a debate. There's no debate. It's just a bunch of guys getting up and pontificating. But he didn't hold up his normal cartoon of the bomb. He held up a map and he bragged about this corridor and how it's going to make Israel economically relevant in the future. And that's Israel's only hope right now, is they can terminate any discussion of Palestine, because from the Israeli perspective, if you leave Palestinians in place, you know, the global narrative has turned to, we want a Palestinian state. And Israel, as long as that discussion's happening, this corridor can't happen. If this corridor doesn't happen, Israel loses any leverage it has for getting normalized relations with the Gulf states. So Israel believes they have to purge the region of Palestinians and make any discussion of a Palestinian state moot, which they thought they had done. That's what the whole purpose of the Abrams Accords were. It's to make moot a Palestinian state by pretending that you want a Palestinian state. Yes, we believe in a Palestinian state. However, we'll let Israel get away with murder, or the Brooklyn Jews get away with murder in the West Bank, and we won't care about Gaza, and we're just going to normalize relations with Saudi Arabia anyways, and Palestine will go away, will never happen. That's the reality that existed on October 6th. People forget that. On October 6th, there was no chance in hell. If you had polled everybody about where we were going with a Palestinian state, everybody would have said, ain't going to happen. It's not going to happen. It's impossible for it to happen. Look at the maps. Look at the tiny little green spots on the map. You can't make a Palestinian state out of this, which is what the Israelis and the Americans wanted. So it wasn't going to happen. Hamas changed that paradigm on October 7th. And that's why if you always crack me up, Piers Morgan, do you condemn Hamas? Well, I don't know, Piers, because let me put it this way. Everybody today is saying that they support a Palestinian state. Let me ask you, Piers, do you support a Palestinian state? Well, yes, I do. Then you can't condemn Hamas, because if it weren't for what Hamas did on October 7th, you wouldn't be in a position to say you support a Palestinian state, because on October 6th, no one was talking about it, right, Piers? So you're a hypocrite, right, Piers? So is everybody else out there who says, well, I support a Palestinian state, but I condemn Hamas. No, you don't. You wouldn't be having this dialogue today about a Palestinian state if Hamas didn't do what it did on October 7th. So if you're sitting there saying, I support the Palestinian state, be honest. You support Hamas. You support what Hamas did. Because otherwise, you're just a hypocrite and you're shallow and you make no sense, and get the hell out of the dialogue.
Well, you made a great segue.
Probably just got you banned from YouTube. So.
Oh, wait, we don't care. You did do a great segue into the next topic, though. Palestinian statehood. The antics of Israel do not stop when they leave Israel. They actually increase. So we had a nice charade today at the UN after the UNGA vote. Just so you guys know, there was a vote today that did back the United Nations, did back Palestinian membership in UNGA. Here's a vote breakdown, 143-9 with 25 abstentions. The voted against is Argentina, the Czech Republic, Israel, Micronesia, Nauru, Papua New Guinea, United States, Palau, and Hungary, interestingly enough. But the best part of the whole thing, I think, is your brain on Zionism. Let's take a look.
This is you are shredding the UN Charter with your own hands. Yes, that's what you're doing. Shredding the UN Charter. Shame on you.
Shame on you. Shame on you. What is going on at the UN? I don't even know what to do and what to even say. Why does he have a miniature shredder? What is going on? I believe Israel already shredded the UN Charter. What is happening?
This is just, unfortunately, the United States has turned the United Nations into a children's playground when it comes to Israel. It's no longer a place where adults meet and discuss issues. Forget, is this guy's name's Cohen? Is that his last name, or Stuart Cohen or something?
Eli?
Like
Is it his name?
Eli something.
I can't even remember the cast of characters. I'll look it up while you talk.
Yeah, I'm going to be accused of being anti-Semitic because his last name isn't Cohen. They're going to be, why did you assume it was? Does it sound Jewish? Yeah, I mean, that's the whole idea. He's an Israeli. He's a Jew. Probably has a name that sounds Jewish.
Gilad Menesh Erdan.
There, Gilad. There it is, Gilad Erdogan. I mean, this man's been doing, stand-up comedy like this from the very beginning of this. He's been doing, charades and just acting mad and acting angry and acting this because he can't engage in a meaningful dialogue. I mean, one would hope that if you're the ambassador of your nation, that you would, the job of diplomacy is, of course, to defend your position as strongly as you possibly can. But it's also to try and win people over to your side. The Israelis have stopped even trying because they don't need to try. They just have the United States do all their heavy lifting for them. And so he can sit up there and shred a UN charter with the mini shredder. I mean, where the hell, who did they came up with that idea? Did they staff it with the foreign ministry back in Tel Aviv or in Jerusalem? Did they say, hey, we think it's a good idea to stand up there with a shredder and shred the mini charter? And somebody went, yeah, that's a good idea. Or did he just wing it? Who knows? But it's a joke. We have this thing going on. How many Palestinian children were killed while that charade was being played out in the United Nations? And that's really all that matters here. Until the United Nations is ready to intervene decisively to stop this, and again, it requires American leadership. But America is never going to abandon Israel. We can't. Israel owns us, or we own them. There's this mutually supportive relationship that addicts have. That we're addicted to each other, addicted to love. Who knows? But it's frustrating to watch it. I, to be honest, I tune out a lot because my wife doesn't like it when I throw things at the TV, and she makes sure that everything's cleared out around me, and then she makes me turn off the TV. So I can't watch this anymore. It's very frustrating. It's the same thing with reading. I'll be on my cell phone or on the computer reading, and I'll just push myself away and walk away because I'm not a young guy anymore. And you put this poor heart through too much stress, it's going to just kick over and die. And the hypocrisy of my country stresses me out. It really does stress me out because I have given my life for this country. I mean, I literally have poured every aspect of my adult life into defending this country, into serving this country, and to just watch it all be washed away by stupidity. And now there'll be some people out there say, Scott, America's always been stupid and always been hypocritical. Yes, I'm not debating that point.
Right.
What I'm trying to say is there was a time when I still believed in America, and I want to believe in America again. I'm not walking away from my country. I'm one of these idiots that'll be here till the bitter end. But it gets harder and harder. Every time I say, okay, one more time, sit down and just let's see if we, by applying the principles and values of the nation to these problems, maybe I can articulate something that resonates sufficiently that we can get a shift in public opinion. And then I talk until I'm blue in the face, purple. I write till my arthritic fingers bleed, and nothing happens. I mean, we both, we know we have followers that are plugged in, and they are supportive. I'm not condemning the followers, the people who are listening, but are we really moving the needle on public opinion? And the answer is not really. I mean, in order to move it, you need a jump start. We get a jump start with these students, and I'd like to believe that by joining, by aligning myself with the students, maybe I help move that needle just a little bit, but they're the ones who turbocharge that. I have the same issue on nuclear disarmament. I'm sitting here getting sick to my stomach every day as I watch us lurch towards the inevitability of nuclear conflict. And maybe we'll get into that when we talk about Russia, but it's tough to do this. I mean, there's a reason why I didn't do podcasting for a long time. And it's because it's a very frustrating experience. I really don't enjoy listening to myself talk. If I'm going to speak or if I'm going to write, I'd like to believe that it's designed for a greater purpose to help move things along. And I'm increasingly confronted with the fact that, at least as I observe it right now, I'm not moving that needle, and it's just a very frustrating. Maybe I need to learn not to care. And just
no, I think that you're not giving yourself enough credit, because I think of all the people that we see on social media, probably you and Jackson are probably responsible for moving the needle the most, and especially in terms of Russia. I mean, you and
Russia,
Jackson
yeah.
have done a tremendous job, and that's part of it. That helps with people to understand that you and Jackson, maybe even myself, I'll toot my own horn, but you exposing these Western lies about Russia helps people be clued in that there's other Western lies. So I don't think that you should sell yourself so short because you did all this work leading up to it. And those seeds were planted, those seeds of doubt. And now people are questioning the government a little bit more. But you did mention Russia. I think Russia's getting fed up with this nonsense in the Levant. But on top of that, they did Happy Victory Day, everyone, and you too, Scott. But at the day after Victory Day, they commenced somewhat large offensive in the Kharkiv area, which is somewhere that has been sensitive for the entirety of the SMO. What do you think about? I'll put up the map just so our you can see it, and so can our listeners. But what are you thinking about this northern offensive from the new group, the Northern Group? This is a new group established by Russia, the Russian Federation, recently. What should we expect from this? How's Russia doing, et cetera, et cetera?
Well, let's back up just a little bit. In the lead up to the Russian election, and I can't overemphasize how important the Russian election was in March. There's a lot of people in the West that say, well, it was a preordained outcome, Putin was going to win. So that's not the point. The point was how Putin won and why Putin won and why he got the outcome he did. You have, Putin rolled in and got 77% of the Russian population to participate in an election where it was a foregone conclusion. Normally, when you have no choice, people say, I don't want to vote. There's no choice. People stay home. Here, you really didn't have a choice. It was Putin. But people went because they listened to him. And he said, this isn't about me. This is about the Russian state. This is about you're saying that you approve of the Russian state and you approve of making the Russian state even stronger. And 77% of them came out and said, yes, I support that. I want to have my voice heard. 88% of that 77% voted for Vladimir Putin. Big numbers. So this gives him a mandate to do a number of things. One is, I think, what we're going to be seeing in the near future politically. He's going to be cleaning house. And you heard this in his inauguration address, where he said that it's the heroes of the special military operation who will be leading Russia going forward. So you're going to see him purge Russia of all of the fence sitters, all of the governors, all of the mayors, all of the economic leaders who didn't jump on board the special military operation, who, they didn't leave the country, but they were always in the background going, nope, we're not going to go the extra mile. There are a whole bunch of Russian citizens who did go the extra mile, and they're the ones that are going to be rewarded. They will be the leaders, the people who served in the SMO, the people who worked in defense industry, the people who supported Russia from a domestic political perspective. This is an empowering move for Putin and the Russians as well. He also made the decision that the time for negotiation was over. They had left that door open. They kept saying, "Door's open, guys. You're welcome to come back to the table." It has to be realistically based, meaning we had an agreement that was agreed upon that you walked away from before. We had to alter it a little bit because of reality, but it's still there. We can still have a discussion. To give you an example, I interviewed a Ukrainian politician who fled to Russia. He's part of the Ukrainian government in exile, so to speak, who advises the Russian government about a post-conflict Ukraine. And I asked about the future of Kharkiv and Odessa, and he said that it depends on the Ukrainians, that if they are willing to sit down and negotiate with Russia, and meet Russia's needs, that he believes that it is entirely possible for there to be a Ukraine that includes Odessa and Kharkiv as part of Ukraine, along with Dnipropetrovsk, Nikolaev, and things of that nature. But that Ukraine would have to be part of a economic union, political and economic union, similar to the one that Belarus currently enjoys with Russia. Ukraine would have to join a three-way union with Belarus, Russia, and Ukraine, united economically, united politically, and then Russia could trust Ukraine to have these major industrial areas that would be developed so that they help the greater economic good of this new trilateral union. But that requires Ukraine to sit down. He said, now Ukraine can choose not to do that. Then we have to do certain things militarily that will strip away Odessa and Kharkov from whatever post-war Ukraine it is. That Ukraine will still be subordinated to Russia, but it won't be nearly as a beneficial relationship. Russia went over, General Shoigu, Marshal Shoigu, said that, the other day he gave a speech and he said that Russia's on the offensive. And I went, what? It's the first time I heard a Russian general say that. You guys are always talking about the active defense. We're actively defending, which is part of their attritional warfare model. Now they've gone over to the offensive. It's still an offensive based upon attrition. They're not big red arrows jumping around so that the Ukrainians can cut them off and inflict casualties. This isn't going to be a repeat of the struggle for Kharkov in 1943, where it exchanged hands several times and lots of people died on both sides. Right now, the casualty ratio for the Ukrainians is tipping over 1,000 a day. The Russians are at the lowest level of casualties they've had since this war began. Now, with the Russians coming in to the north, you're probably looking at the casualty ratio getting up closer to 2,000 a day, and the Russians still have very small casualties because they dominate across the board militarily. But so Russia's on the offensive now. This is an offensive that's designed to achieve the strategic defeat of Ukraine and the collective West. They're going to put this thing to bed. Normally, I don't like to. I made the mistake. When I was a Marine, and I gave intelligence briefings, you have to do your, you finish and then you have to do the courses of action. What I believe the enemy is going to do. Course of action Alpha, boom, 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 boom. Course of Bravo, and then I pick the one I think is more likely and why. And usually there's a timelines attached. So I treated the general public as I would my military superiors. And so I said, I believe that by the fall this will happen, by late summer this will happen, and then because the Russians everything I said was going to happen did happen, but the results didn't happen because other things happened, other things occurred, and all that. People are like, but you said the war was going to be over in the fall. Well, there's a lot of caveats built into that. So I've decided, and then people can't handle it. So I decided that I'm out of the putting a date on the calendar business. But I don't have to worry about this now because Russian generals have taken care of that for me. Russian generals don't normally commit. They've run a calendar-free operation where it's objective-driven, not date-driven. There's no, get this done by this date. It's get this done. But now the Russian generals, and I had conversations with them back in January. They told me that in May, it's May right now, there's going to be major changes in the map, meaning that you're going to see movement in the map because the Ukrainian army, having suffered this attrition and not being reinforced sufficiently with manpower and equipment, is going to start collapsing. The Russians are going to be starting to break through defenses, and there won't be a counterattack. There won't be a second line of defense, and you're going to see movement on the map. So this very static map that we've seen with little gains here, little gains there, little gain there, is going to change in the month of May. So we'll see by the end of the month of May, if we take a look at how the map looked at the beginning of May and how it looks at the end of the May, let's see if there's some major changes there. They also said that they expect the Ukrainians to totally collapse this summer. So as you make the move on the map, things are going to happen where the Ukrainians just can't sustain the fight, and there's going to be a total collapse. And several high-placed generals said they expect this thing to be over this year, that they don't expect the war to go on beyond this year. And I think this is what we're seeing. I think we're seeing the beginning of it. It's interesting who they have leading this northern group, General Lapin. People might remember that he was fired back in 2022 after the Kharkov counteroffensive done by the Ukrainians that pushed the Russians away from Kharkov. He came under criticism for I guess some people said he was too aggressive. Some people said he didn't react fast enough. There was a lot of criticism there, and he was relieved. And people went, well, that's the end of him. Yeah, he's a hero of Russia, by the way. This man's not a coward. I think one of the things that got him in trouble is that when the Ukrainians were breaking through and unit was withdrawing, he grabbed a submachine gun and his staff and he went to the front line and he led the guys on a counterattack, a general leading the counterattack to hold the line. And I think they might have said, if it got that bad that a general has to lead the counterattack, maybe there's a problem with the general. So they pulled him back. But you don't take a man of that caliber and ruin his career because of that. They took him back. They got him plugged into the academies. They got him up to speed. And now he's in command of a major army group getting ready to launch one of the more decisive offenses of this war. He's a good man. Somebody else who just recently arrived back in Russia is Surovikin, the General Armageddon. You know, at the end of after Prigozhin did his little coup back in 2023 June, General Armageddon disappeared. Some people said he was under arrest, placed under house arrest. Well, he flew off to Africa. We saw photographs of him in Tunisia, maybe in Algeria. And we don't know, was he in charge of the transitioning from Wagner to Africa Corps? We don't know. What we do know is that he's on an airplane heading back to Russia right now. And maybe the Russians are getting ready to bring him in too, you know, because he's a very capable military mind. So we'll see what the Russians are doing. But the bottom line is that the Russians have decided to begin a process of decisive engagement. What I believe is happening right now is that they pressed the Ukrainians all along the line of contact and compelled Ukraine to commit reserves that it didn't have. So they had to pull units out of the Kharkov front along the border. They had to pull units up from Odessa, pull people back from Kiev. And then they pressed them again until they're done. The fire brigades that Ukraine had, the 67th, I believe, Mechanized Brigade, which is the right sector's thugs, the 3rd Assault Brigade, which is Azov, the 25th Air Mobile, which is a 100% Banderist unit. These are the three, thug units that they always sent in to plug the gaps. 25th is, I think, disbanded because they were destroyed and they quit. The 67th and the 3rd are just saying, we don't want to do this. We're refusing orders. They've been ordered into, some of the fighting in Chasiv Yar and all that. They're saying, no, that's suicidal. We're not going to do it. If you're elite fire brigade units, this is like the 1st Marine Brigade during the battle for the Pusan perimeter, telling the general, the commander, nope, we're not going to go up there and plug that hole anymore. It's suicide. You got to plug the hole. North Koreans are coming.
What do you think? Garamond posted a really good map today, our dear friend, with how close they are, but making that land bridge across Odessa to Transnistria. And we also have the governor, I guess you would call her, of Gagauzia meeting frequently with Putin. What's going on in that southern corridor?
Well, that will, in order to do the southern corridor, because remember, Russia has finite forces. If we didn't learn anything from the fact that Russia overcommitted itself early on in this special military operation by trying to do a lot with only 200,000 troops, Russia's learned that lesson. So what Russia needs to do is, as I said, they did this unit. They got the units refusing to engage right now, backing off. At this point in time, when this line, the Donbass Zaporizhia line, is as stressed as it could be, Russia's coming down from the north. Now the Ukrainians they're in the classic horns of the dilemma. You got reserves, whatever reserves you scrape, you pull them out of Odessa, pull them back from Kiev. Do you plug them into Chasiv Yar to stop that offensive, stop that breakthrough, or do you go up and try and plug that hole that just broke open in the Kharkov front? You can't do both. And as you move to plug the hole, you're getting hit. That unit's hit. You have another breakthrough here. You have no units now. And what's going to happen is it's going to be like, that old cartoon of the Danish boy going down the road on the dam, and he stops and, hole in, he plugs it with one hand, then another hole, and he plugs it. He ends up, with 10 fingers and 10 toes in there, and then one more comes in, and the whole thing comes out. That's the Ukrainians right now. They're just too many holes in the dam. They don't have enough fingers to plug them up anymore, and the dam's getting ready to break. And when that dam breaks, and the Ukrainians make that mad rush. This is why the French are talking what they're talking about, because the French know exactly what I'm saying right now. We are very close to a general collapse of the Ukrainian front lines. And once the Ukrainians start to do their precipitous withdrawal, it could lead to a rout. And in order to stop that rout, there's a handful of brigades in the Odessa area that are combat capable. They'll have to be deployed to try and stop the rout. And when that happens, there's going to be nothing in Odessa. And that's when the Russians now can make their move to bypass Odessa and secure secure the land bridge to Transnistria. The French are saying once that happens, it's over. It's finished. So how do we stop that? French troops, NATO troops, Western troops. That is literally the only option that exists now, because without those troops, what I just described, I believe, is inevitable. I think this incursion from the north is going to trigger a reserve emergency that's going to lead to neither front being well served, leading to a collapse, shifting of forces to help stem that collapse, opening up for a move towards Transnistria. Now, will the French come in? I think the Russians just told them, we'll nuke you if you do. So I don't know if the French now are so enthusiastic about going into Odessa.
Do you think that Xi told the French, you better chill out, when they were on their little vacation this past weekend?
No, I think Xi's whole thing was putting them straight. It's not about chill out. That's Russia's business. Xi's not in the business of issuing threats for Russia. But I think that what he did say is, we're not going to do anything to stop the Russians. Fact is, we're going to do whatever we can to keep Russia strong and viable here. We're on Team Russia. And oh, by the way, if you sanction us, we'll just pull the plug on your pathetic little economies. I mean, Schultz, when he went to China, was told by his industrial leaders, the only thing that keeps us viable, VW, the only thing that keeps VW viable is the Chinese business, because every aspect of VW's operations in Germany and Europe is losing money. And so if we de-risk, he told Schultz, and start to draw down, we go bankrupt. We're done. And what we'll have to do at that point in time is leave Germany and go to America. And I think all the other manufacturers did that. Porsche has left Germany and gone to America. I used to be pretty happy about that when I was a younger guy. I had a fantasy about driving an all-black Porsche 911 SC turbo, rough modified. But I'm getting old now and I can't fit into little cars. But but Porsche is coming to America because they can't stay in Germany anymore. France has similar problems, deindustrialization. I don't know what leverage France and Germany and Europe think they can bring to bear, but I think Xi was coming in to let them vent and then remind them, no, you don't have any leverage. We'd like to have good economic relations with you, but if the price for that is us turning our back on Russia, no, we're not going to do it. I think that was the message that Xi was sending.
We're going to wrap up because I've stolen an hour, but what are your final thoughts? You can't predict even further than 2 or 3 days. So what do you think is coming down the line? What are your hopes for the summer? And what are you up to?
What am I up to? Well, I'm actually going to Russia again in June, early June. I'm going to the St. Petersburg International Economic Forum. It's part of a commitment I've made this year to try and not promote Russia, that's the wrong term, educate people about the reality of Russia. The St. Petersburg International Economic Forum is everybody knows, if you say Davos, the World Economic Forum in Davos, Switzerland, everybody's like, oh yeah, really relevant. It's irrelevant. I mean, look, they just had a meeting. It didn't matter. Everything they said didn't matter. St. Petersburg International Economic Forum is Davos on steroids. It matters. Big speeches are made, big decisions are made, a big economy is made. I was invited the last couple of years and I didn't go because I'm one of the dumber people on the planet. And I read something that said, St. Petersburg International Economic Forum. Well, I'm not an economist. What could I possibly learn there? And they all went, it's about geopolitics, dude. And that's what you do. And so I finally have been convinced that I'm going. So I'm going to go. I'm going to attend the conference and hopefully get to meet some cool people and learn a lot more about Russia, and then try and capture that and bring it back. And then I'm going on. You remember Tucker Carlson, our good old friend Tucker?
No, I never heard of him.
Ever heard of his name? Well,
No.
he was this guy that has, a couple million followers, and he went to Russia and he interviewed some guy, Vladimir Putin, and over 1 billion people watched the interview and all that. But instead of talking about the substance of the interview, a lot of Americans went, well, Tucker's just in Moscow. He didn't see the real Russia. There's a Russia out there that sucks. It's like falling down around and all that stuff. Now, I can personally tell you that's not the case, because last May I did a tour of Russia that included the real Russia, 12 cities in 26 days, and 10 of those cities weren't called Moscow and St. Petersburg. So, but I came up with the idea that no, I'm going to show America the real Russia. So I am going to be going to Russia I think we're going to start the tour shortly after St. Petersburg International Economic Forum, and it's going to go on till July 20th. So I'll be in Russia for more than a month, and I am literally going from the Pacific Ocean to the Baltic Sea and everything in between. And we're going to be doing live podcasts and producing video content and all that stuff. But the whole idea is just to educate. We'll be talking to regular Russians. We'll be talking to leaders, economic leaders, historians. And the whole idea is to show America Russia. And I can't, for security reasons, you guys know I'm on a Ukrainian assassination list, and they are actively trying to get my name, say, liquidated. So if we publish the itinerary and told you when we were going to be someplace, there's a chance they would try to censor people. And again, I'm 62. You want to kill me? God, give it your best shot. But what I don't want to do is have a meeting where innocent people are put at risk. So I can't allow that to happen. So, and the people that I'm working with in Russia agree. And so we'll announce that maybe a day before, so that we do get to meet with some people. But people, all I would ask is just go to scottritter.com and follow us. We're going to be doing this. It's going to be cool as hell. We're going to make a documentary based upon it. We're going to publish a book based upon it. But the whole idea is to try and educate people. And I will continue in that mode. In August, I'm going to the Moscow International Security Conference, again, as a guest of the Ministry of Defense. And the whole idea is to learn more insight about not just the war in Ukraine, because I think by that time it's going to be pretty much a settled deal. You have a lot of things to clean up, but what's Russia's vision post? You hear everybody in the West talking about Russia plans on moving on to Berlin, moving on to Warsaw, moving on to this. I believe Russia just wants to live in peace and harmony with people, and they'd like to engender a new European security framework. And so I'd like, rather than to speculate about it, I'm going to attend this conference and I'm going to listen to the Russians. That's the key aspect. Listen to the Russians. Listen to what they have to say. You can learn a lot. And then the final thing I'm going to do this year in terms of Russia is I'm going to the BRICS summit.
Well, that's what I was going to ask. Why aren't you just staying are you staying all the way through?
Hell no. I got a wife and I got a family. I got to come home.
They're not going to let you back here. If you're too nice to Russia, you show them too much. They're not going to let you. Better have to bring your wife to the BRICS conference.
No. Look, I've made 2 trips to Russia within the last year. The big May trip, I was held up at the airport for a number of hours coming in. They asked me a lot of questions. They gave me my passport back and let me go. I went to Russia in December and January, again, for a little over a month, to include visits to Chechnya, where I'm sure I pleased all of America by speaking in front of 25,000 Chechen soldiers at the invitation of Ramzan Kadyrov. I went to Crimea, met with the governor of Crimea. I went to Kherson, met with the governor of Kherson, went to Zaporizhia, went to Donbass, went to, Mariupol, met with Denis Pushilin, the governor of Donetsk. I went to Kherson, to Lugansk. And when I arrived at the airport coming home, I fully expected the SWAT team to be there. I mean, red dots dancing off my body. I sat down, I spent an hour while they held on to my passport. They didn't even look at it. I think they were just reminding me who's the boss. And then after an hour, they called me up, gave me my passport, said, "Welcome back to America, Mr. Ritter." And they let me go. I'm not breaking any laws, and I'm very careful to make sure that I'm not breaking any sanctions or even come close to that. I don't openly criticize my government while I'm over there. I'm attuned to that, that optic. My whole purpose is to improve relations between Russia and America. I'm not violating the Logan Act because I'm not negotiating on behalf of the United States. I'm simply going over to say, I'm an American ambassador of peace, an individual, and I'm just showing the Russians that Americans aren't all jerks and assholes, that we can actually be. And I'm also there to gather information about Russia and bring it back to America so I can engage in a dialogue. I mean, do you guys want to hear from Ann Applebaum, who's not been to Russia forever and only hates everything about Russia? Or do you want to hear from somebody who just got back from Russia, actively engaged with the Russians, collected data so that you could talk to it? I'd like to believe people would want to have the active engagement aspect of it. So I'll be going to Russia 3 times this year, spending a lot of time in Russia. But the purpose of it is to educate people about the reality of the Russian political situation, the cultural and societal. I'm sitting here going out of focus. Don't think maybe it's my eyes. Maybe I finally blew the gasket, but there we go. Sort of focused. Yeah, there. Oh God, should have stayed out of focus. But yeah, but the whole idea is to gather a broad spectrum of data to put out there for an American audience so that we can be more informed about what we're talking about. When I come back from BRICS, the election's in November. And so I'm hoping that nobody in America can say, well, I didn't know, or there's no way I could have known what was going on with Russia. I know Jackson's going. I know Jackson's going to be there at St. Petersburg. I know he's going to be there at BRICS. Other people are going to go. I think we're starting to see a trend where people are saying, let's go to Russia, learn about Russia, bring it back and educate people. And let's hope that. I'm also, I'll go ahead and say it here because the more this gets out, the better. But for 2025, I have 3 more trips planned to Russia. Hey, American government, now's your chance. Pull my passport, baby. Don't let me travel. But in February, I'm hoping to put together a conference in Crimea called the New Yalta Conference. February is the 80th anniversary of the Yalta Conference. And the idea of this conference was to bring in international lawyers to talk about post-conflict reconciliation between Russia and Ukraine. And we'd invite Ukrainians, we'd invite Russians, we'd invite everybody there to have this conference. And then in July, August, to go to Potsdam and have the new Potsdam conference to promote reconciliation between Europe and Russia. So 2025, we're going to take it a step further and try to actually begin a process of having this. Now, this won't be governments talking. This will be, informed citizens of each country coming in. But, when we're speaking about bringing in some of the best legal minds, and we're going to capture the various panel discussions and larger discussions, papers will be submitted, and we're going to capture them and try and publish them in a format, either online, in a book, or both, that would be available to academics and available to government officials. And maybe we can plant some seeds and show that there is a potential to have this kind of dialogue, so we can bring an end to this cycle of insanity that is driving us together. And then, just for selfish reasons, the 80th Victory Day parade is on May 9th.
Oh, okay. So there you go.
I may sneak in there just to see that.
One last question, Scott, from our listener. Thank you, Pro86. Has Scott or Sarah ever read The Fourth Turning? And if so, what do you think about it? I've not read it. I posted my book pile last night, and it's I'll add it to it, but there's 30 books there now. So have you read it, Scott?
I haven't, but I will Google it.
I'll read it and I'll let you know what it's about. Thank you so much, guys. Make sure that you find Scott on social media. You guys know where he is. I don't need to tell you. And go to ddgeopolitics.com. We will be visiting with Shay this week to talk about his fun at the Victory Parade. And I think Professor Morandi will be on soon. Thanks again, Scott. It's been another great episode of DD Geopolitics live stream. And I guess enjoy the rest of your weekend.
Thanks, you too.